Okay, welcome back again. This is part 5 of building the Wilson II, and in this part I'm going to build the extruder assembly, and then we're going to mount that onto the printer's frame that we've already built. So what I've got here in front of me besides our frame is I have the stepper motor for the extruder and a 40mm fan that will be used for our print cooling. I have the hot end that I'm using, a servo, and the end stop that will be used for bed leveling, or the Z-axis leveling. And then I have the printed parts for the extruder along with nuts and bolts that I'll describe as we go along. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get the end stop and the servo together, and what I've done here so far is I took the servo as they come like this with about a 6-inch, 8-inch wire attached, and I spliced that to a longer wire so it still has the same little 3-pin connector on the end, but you need these wires to be about 70 centimeters long total for both the switch and the servo. Once that's done, I'm going to get the end stop switch, and the first of the plastic parts that I'm going to use is this little T-shaped doohickey. This will hold the end stop on the end of the servo, and find the side here that has a groove built in. The other side's totally flat, and on the totally flat side I'm going to mount the end stop so that the lever arm points towards the end, and just put two M2 by 16mm screws through here. Put those through the opposite side and just secure them with a nut. And then tie these two wires down so they stay secured against here with a zip tie through these little slots. Okay, and now on the other end, back on the other side of it where there's that groove, there's a part that comes with the servo motor. Looks like this. And take that and push the pointy end down into here with it turned around so that the post of that sticks out through this other side of the hole. And that is going to attach right onto the gear coming out of our stepper, or our servo rather, like that. Just put it so that it's in line with the servo. And then there's a tiny little screw, also comes with the servo, so I don't actually know what its specs are, but it's made to attach to that gear. And just tighten this down. And hold this part with your hand while you tighten this so that you're not applying any torque to the actual servo gear. But tighten it down nice and tight. And there might be still, you can see there's a little bit of wiggle this direction on here, but that's okay. If it bothers you, you could push this outward and put a dab of hot glue or something here, but the main thing is that it's pretty secure this way. So now get the other plastic part that belongs with the servo. That's this guy, and the point of this triangle goes down, and our servo is going to fit up inside here. Oops. With the arm of our end stop down like that. This edge here is meant to kind of trap the lever arm so that it won't move when it's in the down position. But put the servo motor wire through this center part and then hold it like this. Just like that. Right here in the top is a little hole. Put another M2 16mm screw through there, and a nut on the back side to secure the servo. Getting this M2 nut inside here is always a little tricky for me because the spot is a little smaller than my finger. But let's see how it goes. Might have to use a pair of needle nose to hold that in place. And then the wires for both the end stop and the servo, we want to secure to this plastic part here. There's another little slot. And the way this is going to work is the servo is going to raise and lower this little switch on this lever. So the two wires for the end stop switch you need to make sure that they have enough, they're in a good place where they can take that flex each time. So I like to leave a little bit of a loop here and then bring it back and gather up the servo motors and tighten the whole bundle down. That. Okay, so now we can put this aside for a minute while we do the next step. So I'm going to get the frame up here where you can get to the X carriage and get the body of the extruder. It's this one. And we're going to mount this to the X carriage first. There's a pattern here. These 4 holes will line up with these 4. And to do that, you'll need 4 M4 by 25 millimeter screws. And 4 M4 nuts. And if you can, before you put this against there, just see if you can press these nuts into the traps on this. They might be too loose and just fall back out, but ideally it'll kind of stay in place like that. See, this one's gonna just keep falling out on me. But if you can at least get one of them in there, it'll make this next part easier. This one inside here is the hardest to get. But there was just nowhere else to put that, so that's where it goes. So there, that worked out actually. So with those 2 nuts in place, I just hold this up here and put the M4 screws through from the back. Be careful not to push those nuts back out of place. And then put the other 2 in. And then tighten those down nice and tight. Now I'm going to attach the stepper motor. So I have a standard stepper motor. Another 70 centimeters or so of wire is what you want on that. This comes pre-wired, so don't have to do anything with it. And get 2 M3 by 25 millimeter screws and attach. Let me turn this around. These back 2 holes so that they go through there, and that will hold our stepper motor in place. And then I'll put the drive gear on the shaft of the motor. This is an MK7 drive gear. just put it on and line up the teeth of that drive gear with the hole down through the center of the extruder. So this is what will actually push the filament down into the hot end. And now to complete the motor attachment, we need this part. This is the idler. So the purpose of this is, under tension, this will hold that filament up against this drive gear so that the drive gear doesn't slip against the filament. So get this, and you'll need a 624 bearing, and you'll need a 20mm long M4, and you'll need an M4 lock nut. So the bearing goes here between those two parts, and then from this side, from the right, put the screw through so that the head of that screw is on what will be the inside, because the nut is a little bit thicker and it may interfere. And then just tighten this enough so that that screw bites into the lock nut. But be careful not to compress this or you'll break the plastic part, and this bearing should spin freely. And then get another M3 25mm screw, and you hold this here, and you put that last screw through both pieces and into the motor. And you can tighten this screw down without it causing this to be stuck. This should still move back and forth easily after this is tightened. And then you'll need two M3 60mm screws. So these are probably the longest ones that you've got. And you can probably get away with a 50mm, and you can probably get away with a 440 2-inch long screw if you can't get metric or you can't get these of this length. And so on each one of these I'm going to put an M3 washer over it, and then a spring. And the springs that I'm using are 1 inch long, and they're a high tension spring. So you want a spring that has a rated tension of, I think, 10 pounds per inch or more, ideally more. And then I'm going to put another M3 washer over that, like that. I'm going to do that to the other one. Then get two M3 nuts, and these go here. Let's get a closer look. So these M3 nuts are going to go right here in to these slots that are on the top of the extruder. They should ideally just drop down into there. If the slot's a little too small, then you may have to press it in there with the tip of your screwdriver, or you can use a soldering iron that's warmed up to press it down into there too. That works really well. And then just thread these longer screws through the front and into those nuts. These traps on the top should be tight enough so that those nuts won't actually spin. That's why I don't have to hold them, but if yours are spinning, then just hold them with your other hand, your third hand, since I'm using both. So the tighter that we make these, the more pressure it takes to pull this back with your thumb. And this feels about right to me. We want it to be pretty tight. You want to always use your bottom of your hand to kind of hold to support the extruder when you do that, so that you're not putting a lot of pressure here on the whole thing, which would, you know, maybe cause some deflection. So anyway, that's what that should look like. And check here, look inside here that that bearing, that idler bearing, should be making contact with the drive gear. So that's the space where the filament will go down between those two. So next I'm going to attach the fan duct onto here. That's what this funny looking thing that looks like a pair of horns, and its purpose is to direct airflow from this 40mm fan onto our print during extrusion. So before I attach the fan duct, I'm going to attach the fan to the fan duct and place the side that has the label on it on your fan is typically the outlet side, so place that against here. And then this is going to attach with 4 M3 by 14mm screws. And you'll want to kind of check, or as you start, you'll find out if these will bite into this plastic. These are slightly undersized holes so that we don't have to use a nut. But they might be, when this part comes off of the printer, those might be a little too tight, so you can, what I do is just take a Phillips screwdriver and kind of widen the opening just a tad bit. It's kind of crude, but it works. And then turn the fan around so that the wires from the fan come off the top right corner, if you can. Okay. Make sure that's tight against there. Now I'm going to attach this fan duct onto the extruder, so it goes right here on this little fulcrum that sticks out, and attach that with an M3 by 25mm screw and an M3 lock nut. Now tighten this down tight enough so that this fan duct it's still going to be able to swivel, but you don't want it real loose and wobbling around or it might fall into the wrong position. So tighten this screw enough so that it stays wherever you put it. Now I'm ready to attach the hot end. So let me turn this around and we'll zoom in a little bit. So the hot end that I have is an E3D light V6. So this is like the V6 that E3D makes, except it has a Teflon liner, and that makes it much nicer, in my opinion, for printing materials like PLA. And it's also much more economical than the full V6, and all you're giving up is some high temperature printing materials, which if you need that. Then you can always swap this also with a regular V6 from time to time. So this guy just fits into this little notched groove in the bottom of the extruder, and then the last plastic piece you'll need is this little clamp. So with this groove side down, the clamp will just hold the top of the hot end in place, and then put an M3 by 30 millimeter screw through both sides of that clamp. It'll kind of hold it in place for a moment. And now, if I weren't using the bed leveling servo, then I would just put M3 nuts on the back sides of here, and they would fit into these little traps that are built into the back side of the extruder. But I designed this servo mount to attach to the same screws that hold the clamp on, so that the nut that's going to go here is going to actually hold this into place as well. So put an M3 nut onto each one of these. Just kind of get it started. Like that. And then it's these two slots here they're going to fit down so that the screw is going to fit into that groove, and the nut will be trapped on the other side. Like that. And then we'll tighten down the screw from this side, and it's going to pull that nut against this blue part. Okay, so now the end stop switch right here is pointing straight down towards our print surface like we want it to. These wires are kind of out of the way so that can move. And then I'm going to drape all the wires that I've got. There's a lot of wires involved in this whole extruder over the top of the frame. And then later I'm going to show you how to get these all secured, but basically we just want to bundle all of these together right here at the back of the motor so that we don't have loose wires dangling around. So that is the entire extruder assembly part of our build. And what I'm going to do next in the next video is get the electronics attached, put the print bed on. I'll show you how to wire the AC mains switch here, and get the machine up and running.